The topic today is the business of business aviation. We've been excited about technology for charter buying for 10 years now, but we're still sitting here in the top of the first inning. How are we going to accelerate progress? And that's what the panelists are going to discuss today. So I'll quickly roll through quick introductions. We've got Eymeric Segard, the CEO and founder of LunaJets, based in Geneva, there at the end. He founded the business back in 2008. He's got a great online charter platform with a mobile app focused on the B2C market. We've got Nicolas, Deville, the co-founder and COO of Convolus, based in London. He founded the company about a year and a half ago. Convolus has a back-end technology that is looking to create a buying club for operators when dealing with fuel, training, and MRO-type services. We've got Paolo, Sommariva, the co-founder and CEO of Flex, based in Austria, founded back in 2010. Flex is a back-end technology solution for operators and brokers that delivers automated workflows to all team members. We've got David Fox, the founder and CEO of Stellar Labs, based here in Silicon Valley, founded back in 2014. Stellar is building a complete flight operations management, commercial management, and global distribution system, now focused solely on the B2B market. And finally, Gillian, CEO of Aviaa, founded in 2017. Gillian's got a PhD in computer science and is a professor. They're developing a new membership club simplifying how aircraft owners buy services, similar to Convolus, at the final part of the supply chain. First topic we're going to cover are the differences between the airlines and business aviation. From where your businesses reside in the aviation ecosystem, what are some non-obvious differences that business aviation has to deal with? And we'll start with Paolo.
Okay. 10 years ago, we founded the Air Taxi Association, and at the same time, that's when Dayjet and Eclipse were making headlines, as Cyrus earlier brought us down memory lane. And at that same time, airlines were looking at entering the fray of business aviation. Some tried, some just stopped at the project. I know of one project that went on in Europe. Lufthansa actually ended the deal they had with NetJets, and they started Swiss Private Aviation. They bought a couple of small operators, and under the leadership of Peter Koch, they worked for, I think, 2 or 3 years, building an operator that was supposed to do the last mile or to serve tertiary and small airports where the airline didn't reach, to make an extension of that market. Unfortunately, the project didn't work, mostly because they spent most of the time doing compliance for IATA, IOSA, which they never reached. Then finally management changed in Lufthansa, they shut down the project, and they went back to NetJets. So the moral of the story is that I think airlines and business aviation are completely different markets, even though at first sight they look the same. At the same time, I think there's some examples that work, like Delta. In the States, they do have a business jet operator, but I do believe that it's a completely separate business from the airline.
Thank you. Nicolas, you're new to private aviation. Are you surprised where we are compared to where other industries are?
Yes, well, I was. I'm now acclimated to it. But so I joined the industry really last year at Ebase time, coming from the tech industry. Worked for a startup here in San Francisco, running the European operations. But coming from a world of data and platforms and connectivity, and yes, it took me back to understand basically how the behind the scenes works in business aviation, which at the same time then turned into an opportunity, I would say. Because what we do, as you described, so we are a technology-based buying club for operators in Europe, helping them buy at better rates and helping them with optimizing their procurement processes. And what that means basically is that we sit between the operator and the entire supply chain and trying to make everything more efficient, better price transparency and so forth. But it is a lot is still done manually behind the scenes. So while and we'll be discussing that today, but while there is a lot of digitization on the front end, like calling here LunaJets and other platforms, from Private Fly to StrataJet to FlyVictor and so forth, and we'll talk about that later. But it's in the back end, it's still very, very manual between the operator and the supply chain. I think it was Per from Avinode who said at the CGI event in January that on average, every charter flight requires 42 touch points on average, and in extreme cases, it's up to 500 touch points. And by touch points, we mean emails and calls.
Nicolas,
right?
Let's save a little bit for the data.
Sorry,
person.
yeah. But it's I was surprised basically, and it's a lot of opportunities ahead to help with that.
Thank you, David.
It's great. We call that the 300 email problem, so we're very familiar with that. What got me interested in this industry, 7 years ago when I started writing the business plan for Stellar Labs, was I had no concept that there were, almost as many business jets that take off every day as commercial aviation flights. That was the start of a, really interesting journey for me to, really understand the industry. My family dates back into commercial aviation going back to 1931. And I come from the logistics space, and there was all kinds of inefficiencies and lack of transparency in the industry that I felt had to be solved. Where do all these aircraft live? How do you access them? How can you find them? And book a flight on one. Those are some of the immediate challenges that I immediately recognized, where it's very different in commercials. You've got all the OTAs that make it readily available to go and book an aircraft seat. In business aviation, there isn't a platform that exists out there to enable operators to transact with other operators or brokers or corporate flight departments. That was one of the, I guess that's the obvious answer, but those are really some of the real challenges that we're out there looking at changing today.
Thanks. Eymeric, from the front end of the business?
We're at the front end. We're an online booking platform, so I'm here really representing the top VIP clients who charter private jets. For us, the difference, commercial aviation is a scheduled flight. Now, it can be a very big aircraft or it can be a very small aircraft. And we've seen concepts here about shuttles and, in a way, jet sharing. It's a scheduled flight that's going to leave at a particular time. And the idea is to fill that plane with as many passengers as possible. At LunaJets, it's the opposite. Charter flight is the opposite. The technology we use is there to answer the client's needs and not put the client into a plane. So whatever the client wants, whatever the client needs, and whatever his changes are throughout the process of the flight, we need to be there and respond. So it's an upside-down technology that we use to answer the difference.
Thank you. Gillian?
Yeah, so first of all, I really echo a lot of what has been said on the panel already. What I was surprised no one's brought up yet is when we look at the supply chain and the back end, sort of as Nicolas was talking about, what you see in commercial aviation is much more of a community. If you need a part, and you're United, you're going to borrow it from Delta. You're going to borrow it from whoever else you need. That kind of course they compete, of course, but they're also building a community. And I think it goes to the transparency and the sort of logistics issues you were talking about. That's what we're trying to do is think about how can we actually make that community work. And we're all working together to make everything go. And that's where I think we can learn a lot from commercial.
Thank you. Next topic is understanding the complexity of charter. Can technology take the complex and make it simple? David?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons we're in business. Going back to my earlier comment, one of the things that we wanted to start off by changing was, enabling better transparency in this industry. Right now, it's really difficult to do an end-to-end transaction, and these digital platforms are the wave of the future. It is happening, and someone is going to do it in this industry. There's a lot of players out there that are trying to do it. Stellar, I feel, is at the epicenter of that. We want to be here to help revolutionize the business aviation space and also the VTOL space, which is why we're here at this conference. So there are a lot of intricacies that we're working on to change.
Do you think that the eVTOL and the short distance aviation market is really the gold mine for the
I think it's a fascinating market. I think it's the wave of the future. And I also think from a gold mine perspective, I think the second you start putting someone in there that's a paying passenger, you're going to have a scheduling software that's going to have to manage that flight, track it, make sure it's a system of truth so the FAA knows where it's going, and if there's also a safety component that goes with that. And we've got to have a platform that's going to be able to manage all of that.
Thanks. Paolo?
Well, yeah, I mean, I share completely your thoughts. I think that here we're talking about B2C. It's everybody's trying to get to the final sales channel. What the C I see as Eymeric at the end of the panel there. And we do the B part of the B2C, which is the back end. It's a software that runs the entire operation. And the goal there that we set out to do from the very beginning is to have availability and price in real time. Those three things together. Anything short of that, I think, doesn't reach the goal. It's not a back end, right? And once you have that, then you can deliver an inventory. An inventory is a product that you can sell immediately, so that you can actually have a buy button on the screen, just like Amazon. And this is, I think, where this industry is going, and that enables sales at a different level from where we are today.
How long till that buy button works?
So our technology now, I've been working on this problem for 10 years. So the company is 8 years old, and now we have what we call auto pricing, which takes into account all the elements of price, and in real time creates a sellable flight. And now the next step is to get acceptance from the operators. We're looking for operators that are willing to take their hands off quoting and actually relying on the software to send out the quotes which are directly sellable. So end of the year, next year.
Wow. Eymeric?
Yeah, we have a different take, obviously. We use technology differently to the benefit of the consumer, which is a bit different than the B2B that Paolo's talking about. When I created the company 10 years ago, the business plan was to create an online booking platform for empty legs. Okay, so there was a whole bunch of technology there to congregate all the empty legs into a booking platform, and somebody could just come and click and book a flight. That didn't work, but we turned around and moved on to on-demand charter. However, I am still spending a whole bunch of money in technology to keep on updating every day, every year, the platform, the app, the website, and the whole booking experience. So the client is always at the forefront of innovation when booking through us. It's demanding. There's lots of ideas floating around, and some of them work, some of them don't. So you have to kind of choose and pick without making too many mistakes. But so far we're doing a good job, and we're using technology more to speed up the booking process, as you were saying, because it can be a 300 touch point process. But with technology, we're trying to make it faster, to make it quicker, and to make it more pleasant for the end consumer.
So you believe the consumer will still have a psychological need for reassurance on plane, aircraft, weather?
So, yes, two-part question. We don't believe the technology is at this stage and will be in the near future powerful enough to do the whole booking process with just a touch on your iPhone. Okay, that may be a bit controversial, but there's so many things going on to book a flight, a private jet flight, to tailor-make a flight for a consumer. That's what private aviation is. You're tailor-making a flight. So there's so many elements involved that just an app cannot do it all by itself. So yes, technology is there, it helps, but you still need, indeed, the reassurance, the human checks to to make sure everything happens as it should. And it comes with psychological reassurance on the one hand, and it comes through, it's a very opaque industry that we have. Passengers don't know who the operators are, they don't know they don't know the crew, they don't know the pilots, they don't know the brands, so an online booking platform is also there to enlighten him and to explain to him how the industry works and give our recommendation as to what we think the best solution is for him.
Brokers probably control 80% of the charter right now. As the marketplace comes online and the buy button works, do you see that percentage dropping dramatically, comparable to the wealth management industry or the travel agency industry, where the brokers in those industries that actually added value aside from a good price thrive today?
Thankfully, not yet, and not for us, because yes, we are an intermediary at the end of the day, but if you add value to the process, then you have a role to play, and that's what we do. It's really about adding value. It's really about, taking the consumer by the hand and leading him and giving him the best choices that they are out there, which he cannot find by himself and which he had no idea existed. We have a lot of clients who ask us recommendation between, just as far as the cabin and the layout configuration. So, because they don't know what they're buying or the aircraft is new.
So just to clarify, the buy button then goes, for example, on a website like LunaJet or an app where LunaJet can then add value, answering all the questions and customizing further for each customer.
Yep.
Thank you. Next question, is there enough data? Gillian.
So as Craig mentioned, I spent the decade prior to coming over to Aviaa focused on computer science and data, and my flip answer is no, there's never enough data. But the real answer is we're flooded with data right now all the time. What's hard about it is cleaning the data, analyzing it, doing interesting and useful things with it. That's where the challenges come in. There's actually a ton of data sitting around, in some cases in invoices and filing cabinets and management companies and flight departments. Some of it sitting in big suppliers' vaults. And what we need is actually really good analytics tools to deal with the data that we have currently.
Thank you.
I totally agree with that. There's a ton of data out there. It needs to be mined in the right way and used in the appropriate way. And I think the business insights that the data can give can make operators more efficient, corporate flight departments more efficient. People can make better buying decisions. I mean, there's a wealth of it out there. It just needs to be used and manipulated in the right way for people to get the best use out of it. So, absolutely right.
If I may propose a litmus test, I like to call that information. There is information everywhere. Data is something that our platform, for example, can use and leverage to automate and then to optimize processes. And so the litmus test is simply if that piece of information is, well, obviously on an invoice or a piece of paper, but also if it's an Excel sheet, or if you send it by email, or even if it's in a purpose-made software, but it's in a field which is of a text type, so it's free text. All of that is not data. It cannot be leveraged by a simple piece of software. So the first thing that we set out to do, and we found on the way our mission, is to digitize, then automate, and then optimize aviation.
Thanks. Nicolas.
Yes, so I completely understand the viewpoint of there is a lot of data. When I hear data, and it's all perspective, but when I hear data, I think about structured data, which basically means that the data is in a database where machines and systems can actually extract it from, process it, communicate with each other, all that. So if I rephrase the question like that, I don't think there's definitely enough data. A lot of, to follow up on my first long answer, a lot of, for instance, what we have done in the last year was to take that data from, I don't know, for instance, FBOs in Europe, where when you go to them and ask, hey, what software are you using, a lot of them still answer, well, Microsoft Office. okay, so basically they have price lists in Word and Excel. So they have the data, but it can be exploited immediately. So a lot of our work has been to digitize that data and structure it. And now we have 500 price lists of FBOs in an actual database, which now can be actually used between systems to actually get to the point, at some point in the future, when you hear Eymeric saying, you can't really book a flight end to end, right? It's not possible. It's because all of that broken part, basically at the back end of the industry, where the data does not sit in database and doesn't communicate between systems. And the reason why Paolo develops auto pricing, which is based on basically a machine-educated guess of the pricing, rather than the ideal world we should and now working towards, which is basically having the data on the supplier side in a database, accessible via API. And I can simplify what an API is if needed, but accessible so that basically from the booking perspective at the front end, via the operator system like Flex, up to the supplier, you can query a price, and immediately at the click of a button, you can know how much a flight handling will be, and you can book directly, and that booking goes from the front-end platform through the operator system directly into the supplier system, right? And that's where you reduce those touch points from 42 on average up to 500 to basically nothing. It's error-free, and it's one click of a button, and then you have end-to-end booking. So I don't think there's enough data, and I think there's definitely a lot of work to be done to structure the data in the industry to get to that point.
Do the systems need to talk to each other?
Yes.
Does the industry need to come
Yes.
together
Yes.
and speak the same language,
Yes.
similar to what the banking industry has done? Or
Definitely, yes. So the banking industry is a good example of a highly regulated industry, which 10 years ago was also very siloed, and every bank in their corner. And it's the regulator, actually, in Europe at least, I don't know in the US, but in Europe, the regulator came in, and with PSD2 and open banking, I'm not sure if you heard about that, they basically said to all the banks and all the financial industry, well, basically the data needs to be structured like that, and you all need to have APIs. And APIs are basically, there's lots of misconceptions around APIs. APIs is basically just the ability for two systems, two machines to talk to each other. It's basically a mixture of a gatekeeper and a translator, right? So that a machine knows how to talk to the other machine and get the information it needs. But if everyone's developing their things in their corner, it's really hard for all these systems to talk together. So I think the industry will need to come together to define standards, which would just be basically a common language that all players in this industry can build upon to enable that end-to-end automation.
are we stuck in the first inning if that doesn't happen?
Come again?
Are we stuck in the first inning if that doesn't happen?
We are. I mean, there are still innovative solutions that come to market, right? That we see, but it doesn't enable business aviation to move to being very efficient, more profitable, more scalable, and providing better customer experiences, which I think is where everyone wants to go.
Thank you. Paolo?
So if I may add to that, and thank you very much for that, the sources of information are quite fragmented in the market across technical data, commercial data, suppliers' information. It's scattered all over, and there is a number of suppliers that provide it at high cost with insufficient quality and reliability. And so I think that we need a change of mindset in the industry and start thinking of sharing the data, openly sharing the data, and mostly for free. And one good reason one can take in an example here in San Francisco, we're in the middle of some technology giants, and all of these invariably thrive over open and free sharing of data. So I think that we should really all start thinking in that direction in business aviation and stop selling the data.
Thank you. Can anyone solve deadheads? Can an algorithm fix the empty leg problem, Gillian?
So there's a very famous algorithmic problem. My nerds in the room will have heard of this, called the traveling salesman problem. And people refer to this as the airline traveling salesman problem when we want to specify it for looking at legs in commercial airlines. And it's part of a class of what's called NP complete algorithms, which basically means the answer is no. You can throw a lot of computational problems, you can throw a lot of computational power at this, and what you're going to see is you're going to continue to have exponential compute times to actually solve this. Doesn't mean we can't get close. There's lots of great approximation algorithms that you can use and other kinds of things, but it is a sort of essentially known to be unsolvable in a sort of true solvability sense problem. So I think that's an interesting challenge. Airlines have done this in some really creative and clever ways, and they do generally use approximation algorithms. We can do the same in business aviation, but it's sort of a false question, I guess.
Thanks. David, how much additional liquidity needs to be in the market to start making progress?
Well, first of all, on the, the whole, optimization, empty leg kind of conundrum, the industry runs at 37, 38% empty. So by definition, that's massively inefficient. So I think the answer is, can you get down to zero? No, you can't. But I think if you look at what the floating fleet companies have done, like Exojet and TMC and some of the others that run their fleets floating, they're down in that kind of 22, 23%. That's massively efficient. So I think once you get into higher utilization, you can float your aircraft, you don't have to do back-to-base pricing, you're going to start to see some erosion of the amount of deadhead legs that are out there. And then you start layering on optimization, different revenue management, and you will get a more efficient marketplace. And that's part of what we're doing at Stellar, creating that, creating those efficiencies so that operators can reduce the amount of deadheading. That ultimately is going to grow the market, on and on and on. So I think that's where this market's headed, and we will have an impact in the very near future.
Does an operator or Stellar have to take on some additional risk to get those empty legs to book to really maximize those efficiencies?
We may take on additional risk, absolutely. Rather than doing a back-to-base pricing, we might do a one-way price. And if you can run, across these aircraft as in a virtual floating fleet, I think there's absolutely a way you can get the deadheads down. You can take the risk on it. You can move the aircraft back to base eventually, but do it in a more optimal manner.
Eymeric, you launch your business going after empty legs.
Yeah, exactly. It depends how you define, can the problem be fixed? If you can fill an empty leg once in a while, yes, you can. As a business, the business plan was based on doing only that, and it is not justifiable. It is not a long-term strategy, so that doesn't work because the product changes all the time, or can change all the time, or it can be cancelled, or it's the wrong plane, it's the wrong time, etc. So it's very difficult to sell. Now, do we sell once in a while? Yes, of course, and that works, and that's great. But the tangible nature of the asset makes it very, very difficult to sell.
Thanks. Paolo?
Well, I guess this can be achieved only with higher density of flights, a larger quantity of flights, and on a market-wide basis. I don't know how much. I'm not qualified to say, but it's probably an order of magnitude more flights that we need in terms of liquidity of the market to be able to optimize that.
Well, more flights and more demand, obviously.
Well,
the more the demand, the higher the chances of filling that empty leg.
So eVTOL will lower the cost of flying, as we learned today. So it's going to democratize and bring more people to flying, and then it's going to increase liquidity, and then we'll be able to optimize, as I guess we all tried here over the years.
Thank you. Will Uberisation work? Why have other industries had more success when digitizing, like Booking.com, and are there better analogies out there than Uber? Paolo?
I think Uberisation is a misnomer in the sense that hopping casually on a car with a few minutes notice for a short trip that costs a few pennies is fundamentally different from booking a flight that is going to take us far. We need to go to the airport. We need at least a few hours to prepare the flight, and it costs substantially more than an Uber ride. So, I don't see that happening unless new technologies, again, as we learned today, are going to bring the price down and are going to cover the short-range travel.
Well, if you think of the definition of Uberisation, I view that as, you make something easier to buy, people are going to buy more of it. And I think Kenny said this earlier on today, which he might have stolen this out of our playbook. we think, with the advent of OTAs, coming online, what they do to commercial aviation back in 2000 to 2005, they 3x the size of the market because they made it more accessible for people to get access to it. The same thing is going to happen in this industry as well. It's really hard to find access to where the aircraft are today. There's not a platform that has access to all of them, but it is coming. And once you make these assets more readily available, accessible, I think by definition you will expand the market by 2, 3, and 4x over the coming years. So if you mean Uberisation in that sense, I absolutely think that's going to happen. I think all these digital platforms will grow the industry dramatically. You will see some tremendous growth from some of the players that will enable people to get better access to it. And by making it easier to access, people are going to buy more of it. It'll grow it. So that I think is a unique thing that Uber has done in all the markets that they've gone into.
Will the consumer buy from people without brand recognition, or are they going to buy when they see Wheels Up or Delta? I mean, will this newer generation of buyer transact with companies they don't know?
I think people are concerned with safety. I think they want to know what they're getting on is going to be, a safe environment. I think they want to be able to, look at the aircraft. They want to know how many hours the pilots have. So I think if you've got the right settings within your application so that people feel comfortable buying a certain product, that eventually, I think that they will.
Okay, Gillian.
Yeah, so I actually interpreted the question slightly differently. So I definitely see the point from the user experience standpoint and the driving volume into the community standpoint. So I think those are great points. I had actually thought of this as an investment question. So what we see, and there's lots of Silicon Valley VC and PE folks in the audience, so I'll have to be a little careful. But what we see in these models is heavy venture capital investment that allows you to run your company at a loss for quite a while. And I actually see a question on the board here: are any of the companies on the panel profitable? It's a fair question when you think about a startup. And here in the Valley, what happens is you can run a company at a massive loss. You can have very cheap prices to drive people into the business. But at some point, potentially after you've put the sort of old traditional businesses out of business or changed and disrupted the market and changed the way they do business, you have to start creeping those prices up. And I think the difference that you see in general aviation compared to some of the other markets where this has happened is the sheer investment that it requires. Running an aircraft is dramatically more expensive than running a Prius that's going to drive me from the airport into San Francisco today. So there's a substantial investment on the part of operators and other folks, and I don't know if the appetite is there from the venture capital community to run at the kind of losses that you would have to make some of those changes. Thank you.
Eymeric?
Yeah, I think as David says, yes, technology is there, and it's making the prices, the instant prices, and it's giving you the fleet management, the fleet knowing where the planes are, etc. So yes, in that sense, technology is making it easier for the customer to push the button and say, I buy. However, after that, there's still a whole process of legislation, of organizing, of flight plans, of slots. We have big issues of slots in Europe, weather changes, passport control, oversized luggage, etc. A whole bunch of complications that still needs to be addressed, and it really comes from the consumer side, so that we cannot render completely automatic. As Paolo said, in my case, our average ticket is $22,000 versus a $10 to $20 Uber ride. So the expectation of the client is very different, and he wants a perfect service tailor-made to him, which is what he's paying for. So, technology and automatization will go as far, but not the whole way.
Thank you. Nicolas?
Yes, I think it really depends how you interpret the questions, and there's different ways to do it, as we've heard. And I actually agree with everyone seen from a different angle. I think from a user perspective, you have already platformed the market and have been for years that actually give an Uber-like experience where you can book directly from an app and so forth. Interestingly, I love to see new models that aim to increase the TAM, which like Jet Class and Jet Smarter, which definitely are, from my perspective, sort of a Uber pool model. So you see the different Uber type. Now, if I take Eymeric's approach, which was rather my interpretation of the question, it's getting to that point where, I mean, Uber has it actually quite simple because they leverage the fact that everyone has a smartphone on both ends, the user and the driver. But the driver doesn't really need to know basically how much it will cost him or her to book someone to open the door for the passenger and disembark passengers, and how much it will cost to actually just stay on that place for 30 seconds for that. I mean, there's a lot of complexity to business aviation that would make a proper Uber-like model requiring, back to my, I'm very, very single-minded, but data and structured and connected systems to enable that end-to-end automation.
Thank you. All right, a couple questions. This topic comes up every year. What progress has been made in the last 12 months? I think that I'll just sort of rephrase that. Why is it important for business aviation to accelerate its digital transformation now with everything on the horizon? David?
This is the last travel segment that has yet to be digitized, and it's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of software that needs to get built. You can tell by the venture people that are in the audience. I think a lot of progress has been made. It may not be all readily apparent, but there's a lot of product being built, and this industry is well on its way to going through a digital transformation that's going to take it into the VTOL market, and the marketplace. Marketplaces are coming. It's happening. May not be readily apparent, but we're in the middle of it right now. Don't blink.
Nicolas?
Yes, I'm really glad to hear from industry veterans that it is happening. I'm coming with a little bit less background as to what happened before, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done. Digital transformation takes time, right? It's not, you don't switch a button and it's done, right? It takes time, and that's why it's important, I think, for the industry to come together and all the players to really start and engage in that. Operators, for instance, specifically, suppliers specifically, to engage in that, because if you take a step back, we can talk about business aviation and within our industry. But if you take a step back, it's also competing, especially in the next decade or two to come, it's competing against other form of transport, everything from eVTOLs with lower prices and this and that, and built from the ground up with digital systems behind, Hyperloop, which will also provide alternative forms of transport, and you can even take a step further and saying, last week you had Vodafone in the UK doing their first hologram event, right, where you had a person on stage using 5G, and presenting to the crowd, and it looked much better than Leia in Star Wars.
Thank you.
And so it's kind of competition against traveling.
Thank you. Paolo, we got a minute and a half left. Why now?
Well, making software is really hard. It's harder than meets the eye. It seems that typically, you solve a problem having a beer one evening, and then when you go back and next morning you realize it's months and years of hard work and a lot of mistakes made. So I see that today there is a lot of partnerships coming along. There's a lot of new companies like Nicolas and Aviaa as well coming in the market and taking care of different aspects of the value chain. There is more data being produced, more databases being available. We have developed, last time I counted, over 50 APIs to different systems. And so I think this slowly emerges to be a complete network, a unified solution for the industry. It's maybe 1 or 2 years away from being a complete solution.
I think that's truthful. I had a full head of hair when I started this company.
No, just a few words from what we saw this morning. I'm very enthusiastic about the future, because I think the eVTOLs that we saw is going to be very complementary to business aviation, and it's really going to be part of the whole mileage. You have the first mile, and then business aviation, and maybe the last mile. So it'll be very interesting to see how business aviation connects to everything we saw this morning, to make the passenger really fly from home to hotel, from home to destination, in one streamless flight booking process.
So I know our time's already up, but I just want to close really quickly to say that Why now? Because why not now? Yes, software development's hard, but it's a heck of a lot easier than it was 25 years ago when I first started doing it. There are amazing things that we can do now. We can build on other industries. What I'm seeing today in business aviation looks exactly what I saw 20 years ago working in telecom. And so we can model the exact same things and build on those other industries who've come before us. And it's a really exciting time. I think it's a great time. And a year from now, we're going to be in a different world.
Thank you.